Welcome everybody to the latest instalment of the BCS Publishing Author Webinar Series 2025. I'm very grateful that you can join us today, and I'm sure we'll have more people dropping in as we go ahead. We'll be joined today by Johny Morris, who is presenting on migrating to the cloud. Just so you know, this webinar is being recorded so that we can post it online later on. So if you have any concerns with that, I'd suggest we look at the recording when it's available. Otherwise, we will be running some Q&A at the end of the session. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A. You can put them in the chat as well if you'd like to, and I'll be posting those to Johny and presenting those to Johny later on. But yes, thank you for joining us later in our author webinar series. I'll post a link to the series so you can see and register for more. We've got more coming up on everything from AI and business analysis to cybersecurity, more on data as well, because we love data here, as well as architecture, software testing, and other topics that should be of great interest to everybody. So yeah, here we go with this. Johny will be presenting for about half an hour, and then we'll be running over to the questions. So without further ado, over to you, Johny.
Hello, everybody. Hoping you all see the screen. We've been messing about with that so far. So that's me, Johny Morris, author of Practical Data Migration, 3rd edition and 2nd edition and 1st edition, published, wrote those as well. Long time in IT. It says 35. I think I'm getting close to 40 now. So I've been in the game a long time. There's the details of how you can pick up the Practical Data Migration book. It still has a lot of relevance to the topic we're covering today, because if you do go for the software as a service option, then the migration of the data to a cloud platform is almost identical to migrating it anywhere else. There are one or two little changes, but they're covered in the Practical PDM book anyway. Okay. So let's just get started. A bit of history. The cloud is the third paradigm shift we've had in IT over the last 40 years. The first one, of course, was when we digitized paper records into mainframe computers. I am old enough to have actually done some of that, right at the back end of it. And then, of course, client server came along, and there was a move to client server. It kind of overlapped, because we were still creating mainframe systems at the same time as client server was coming into existence. And then finally, we get this final move to the cloud. It's important, because we'll come back to this. This is significant when it comes to actually doing your migrations to the cloud. So at the beginning, there was, as it says here, there's a mix of paper-based systems and mainframes. Paper is still used quite a lot, actually, especially in heavy industry, where handheld devices are either not particularly well supported, or they're actually banned in certain industrial settings. So paper-based systems are still around, and then we type them into something else. In those days, there was a star schema network. In other words, you had the mainframe at the middle. It reached out to the dumb devices, the terminals, the printers, and so on. And there was no interconnection between one computer and another. Each one was a little island unto itself. Obviously, loads of old programming languages that I'm sure we've heard of: COBOL, KIX, and JCL. There were some non-relational databases. That's what I grew up with, IDS2, which was a network database as opposed to a relational one. The operating systems were proprietary. So nothing spoke to anything else. Even within one company I was working for had 2 different operating systems for different platforms. It even had a different byte length. It had an extra parity bit at the end of the byte. So basically what I'm saying is that anything that's coming from those dark ages is going to be different. It's going to be difficult. Doesn't really fit into the way we think these days. It doesn't really fit into sort of the cloud. It makes moving from that area a lot harder. Cloud the second stage, we moved into a client server paradigm. That was in the sort of early to mid 90s. That's when things like Ethernet became available. So instead of having a bunch of proprietary networking systems, we had a standard one. And of course, Ethernet is still around. It's what sits underneath our public telephone network in the UK. We got SQL, we got Oracle, plus a whole load of others that have come and gone. But it's a familiar environment, and not dissimilar to what you'll find in the cloud in terms of its client server approach and some of the constituent parts as well. It says the databases are mostly relational, and that's true. It's a significant difference between the two those two different paradigms, and it makes a big difference when you actually come to do your migrations. The cloud. So there isn't actually a cloud, but there's lots of smaller clouds. And a cloud is, as opposed to a website, is determined by the fact that it provides a service which is internet delivered. Yeah, so it has that familiar client server paradigm, both in the way you interact with it as an individual, plus internally in the way that it's built. There are other client server relationships. It tends to be usage only payments. There's loads of benefits of going to the cloud, other than getting hold of the sexy new software. But there's a kind of, we've outsourced everything else in big business. We no longer do our own cleaning. We don't do our own hospitality and so on. So it was only a matter of time before they came around for the IT, the IT hardware, and move that into a service environment. There's all these other things: elasticity and interconnectedness, non-proprietary solutions. Again, we can the thing is you can put an app on, you can put a cloud onto, or an app into a cloud on the internet, and it's accessible to anybody who can access the internet. So it's a complete different view of the world from those old systems where you were either linked to a mainframe or you weren't. There was no access, and there was no cross access either between one island and another. Theoretically, we should get cost savings, but we'll have a look at that, because obviously you can end up spending a lot of money on cloud services unnecessarily if you're not careful. Right, there are lots of types of services that we can access. It seems like everything has a service these days. But for this presentation, we're just going to look at three, which is software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. Software as a service, at its most elite, has only a very thin client on the client side. So if you're using something like Salesforce, there isn't much more on the client side other than something that will allow you to connect to the Salesforce servers and log in and get to your area. So all the data and all the processing is performed by the service provider. Which is great, but it does create an issue of resilience, because obviously if the service goes down for any reason, if there's a brownout in your area, or if there's a problem with Salesforce itself, not that I'm saying there ever will be, then you can lose all your programming, all your software capability, and it creates there was something before about the continued use of paper records. It does create an issue of connecting to data sources which aren't within a network. And as somebody who's done an awful lot of work in the utilities, I know just what a problem it is to connect to remote workers who are up in the Highlands somewhere repairing power lines. So there are sort of issues with it. There is a sort of theoretical data security risk of overlooking, of somehow crashing into somebody else's space on the I've not ever really heard of it happening for real, so I think that's more of a bogey, really. But then we got platform as a service. I love platform as a service. It's the thing that really attracted me to this back in the noughties when Amazon Web Services first came around. Obviously, as a data migration guy, we need big, powerful machines with lots of memory and lots of data handling capability for very short windows of time. So back in the day, you'd have to try and do some sort of deal with the devil to get a platform that was sufficiently powerful, and then you'd only use it for a few weeks. But now, on the back of somebody's company credit card, you can get some, you can get sufficient power on a machine on a platform which is somebody else is doing the load balancing, doing managing the software, any of the security patches that need to be put on, and so on. These virtual things we'll usually see in public clouds. We'll get onto the difference between public and private clouds shortly. But you do need to manage your spend. This is one of these things where if you don't turn off the machines when you finish using them, they'll carry on costing you money. So you've got to make sure that you use them and to use them as you need them, and then drop your requirements just as soon as you can. So it kind of creates a whole new management layer that you need to look after. Infrastructure as a service. This is like getting a virtual room in the cloud where you can build your own networks. You can build your own virtual services and devices. It does a load backing, balancing, restores, etc. You've all got to do that yourself. Now, we'll come back to each of these as to why it's important that we are aware of the options, because when we come to actually moving, if you're really going to clear out the server room and get everything onto the cloud, then you may find that you need a mix of these different sorts of platforms, and we'll get onto that. We'll get onto that shortly. Okay, now we look at the types of cloud. We have public clouds, and I think those are the ones we're probably mostly familiar with as individuals. We all use them for running your emails or whatever it is. They're owned by a third party. Everything's owned by somebody. It has multiple users will be using the same platform at the same time. They're pretty cheap. I mean, you can get free data storage, as we know, from Microsoft or other people. And you don't get any cheaper than that. So you can get they're very cheap, but they're pretty easy to expand and reduce resources when you don't need them. And you pay by use, but that use can be time, or it can be bits and bytes, or it can be seats or whatever. So you have to see what the usage is on the contract that you sign. There are challenges. There is just as there is this kind of feeling that the data security may not be as good as it could be, and I think especially as we're getting some quasi-state actors, bad actors out there on the internet, that is something we've all got to be a bit more cognizant of. So, do you want to put all your most valuable data into a public cloud? That's a question you got to ask yourself. Or can you even legally do it? And then, of course, there's the issue of where is the data located? Because if the servers are outside of your country's jurisdiction, you've got no control over what that country does in terms of data security and how much it can impinge on the data security of the data that you've got in somebody else's jurisdiction. Latency. We all know that sometimes the internet runs slow. If you're unlucky enough to pick up a node that's not running very quickly or something, so there is a problem about if you really need real time connections, then it's probably not a very sensible option. Most of us can get by with a few bits, a few minutes of latency every so often. I find there's resilience, which is what do you do if it all goes wrong? If you get a brownout, or if you get just a bit like software as a service, really. It's okay if you can just all go out for a long lunch and hope it's all fixed within the hour. But in some environments, that's not acceptable, not feasible, and your regulator wouldn't let you get away with it anyway. So resilience is obviously is a potential challenge. You can have a private cloud. Private clouds are owned by the tenants. There tends to be a single tenant, a single organization that owns it. Obviously, if you're building it, you're using all the software, all the technology of cloud, it's all cloud technology. So you get all the benefits of scalability and so on. But you reduce the latency issue, and you get the strongest security. But you will pay a higher cost for all of that, and of course you will have to maintain your own crew of technologists to support those kind of activities. So the cost will be higher, and you're sort of slipping, in my experience anyway, you kind of start slipping back to the bad old days of having to bargain with the on-site techies to get access to machines, even if they're not virtual machines, because they have the responsibility for being billed for them. Okay, I don't know if there's any questions so far.
We'll mostly get to questions at the end, Johnny, if that's okay. I've got a few things already for you. So.
Oh, that's what I like to hear. Just like make sure everyone's still awake. I can bore people to sleep. Features. What sort of clouds have we got out there? Well, we've also got. What's wrong? Can I come to this? Yeah. So hybrid clouds. That's where you get a mix of your public and private clouds, and some SaaS as well, probably. And I think it's where a lot of companies are going to end up when we have a look at what you're likely to do with some of the candidates that you're trying to clear out of the server room. When you're trying to balance, as it says, resilience versus cost versus data security versus sweeping up the clutter of legacy systems, and again, in my experience, you do tend to end up with a balance of each of those. So you certainly tend to have either a platform as a service, which you're probably using for your development boxes and things like that. It's really good for that, or some infrastructure as a service, as well as possibly a SaaS box, and that you'll be using for the odds and ends that you've got to build special environments for if you're going to move them out of the service server room or out of your own office. Single tenant, so you don't get a chance, less risk of overlooking. Okay, so just to recap this, so we've looked at a minute. So looking at this, we're looking at like two dimensions of two dimensions here. We have the cloud type of dimension, and we have the service dimension. And in theory, you should, they should all be able to support each other. But in practice, you'll tend to find that software as a service is only provided on public clouds. Not entirely true. If you've got a startup, if you're taking software from a small startup company, quite often they'll be running some of their software, off their own servers and as individual instances. But as things get bigger, they do tend to then, come together as a software as a service is sitting in a public cloud. Of course, you can have virtual private clouds as well, but they still come with the same sorts of problems. And when we look at things like containers for tricky software that's difficult to put onto these kinds of platforms, then you'll find, as I say, you'll find that really only works on infrastructure as a service because of the builds you have to put in, the bespoke builds you have to put in. But we'll have a look at that in a minute. Yeah. So the first thing you do is you've got to develop somebody says IOS is the only way to go for the deratus. I like that word. At the end of a migration, all the bits and pieces that you need to sweep up from old and ancient and decrepit machinery, which you can't even move because it would probably fall apart. You need to move it. You need to move it. Logically move it because you can't actually physically move the box. I was working on one gig and they had a mainframe in the basement of the building that was doing some of their old legacy insurance policies. And because of these old mainframes used to run very hot, they were water cooled. So they were quite literally built into the framework of the building. The building's lease had expired. So it had to be moved, but there was just physically no way. You couldn't just lift and shift it. It was physically impossible to do that because of the plumbing. And then we're delivering it. So once we've got our strategy, we're then going to go through a process of how do we deliver it. How do we deliver it to the right place at the right time without breaking anything. So when you're going to create a strategy, this is just the same for any migration, or a lot of it's similar to any migration, really. You want to establish what the high level drivers are. Why are you doing this? And sometimes there's not a lot of thought being given to it. Sometimes there has, but obviously it's very difficult to deliver. You're going to have some choices to make here about latency and about security. You need to understand what the thing, and in different areas, obviously there'll be different goals and different tolerances for security and different tolerances for latency. So you've got to get behind all that and find out, what's the rules of the game you're playing, and sometimes a less than optimal solution is a better solution because the way it fits in with everything else. So you've got to have a strong architectural handle on all of this, but sitting behind that, you have to understand why you're doing what you're doing, what is going to be acceptable, what qualifies as a success. You've got to build a data catalog. Now, data catalog is a list of all the systems that you've got in your operation. That's both the ones that people know about and the secret squirrel systems that people have built on the side. Because if you don't want to, we don't want to break, you don't want to make do a brilliant migration, then break the business because systems that people have been relying on don't work and no longer work. So it's a first step task is to get your data catalog, get it signed off. Don't assume that it's just what the IT department knows about. I've come across whole data warehouses. It was a data warehouse run by a team of 3 or 4 people, that had been embedded in over time, had become embedded into the financial reporting system of an international bank. I'm not naming any names, but it wasn't on anybody's catalogue until we went off and had a look and discovered it. So I'm not saying you tend to find anything like that, but you will find an awful lot of, especially coming from the client server environment, an awful lot of spreadsheets and stuff like that that are filling in gaps for because that the current systems didn't do everything that the stakeholders needed. Finally, go identify your stakeholders. This will be your first list. It takes quite a big. If you're a sizable enterprise and you want to move, maximally to the cloud, it's going to be a long process. So the stakeholders will change over time. But you've really got to find out who is sponsoring this, who your blockers are going to be, and who are the key domain experts you need to get hold of who really understand how the business currently operates. And all of that has to be done prior to, the more effort you put into this, the easier things get downstream and the less very expensive mistakes you make. Can you give a few policies here? I always talk about policies, which is just, there's a list, you can take it home, you can add and take ones out, but this has got a kind of good starter for 10. First is the speed of transition. I'll have a look at that separately. And security, obviously, is a big issue, always an issue. Everyone's got regulators, so what's their view on and I know in some industries like that, just the industry, if you do a change like of this scale, you'd have to requalify.
Hello, Johnny. Hi, everybody. If you're still there, I seem to have lost Johnny for a second now. Yes, thank you, Adam. Yes, give me 1 second. I think he's just reworking it. So yeah, thanks for everyone for being here. If you haven't seen in the chat, we do have an offer on Johnny's book with a discount code called AuthorWeb, which you can use at the checkout of the BCS bookshop. Johnny also wrote a short library exclusive, which is hosted on the BCS library, which is a member exclusive product that we have available through basically BCS membership journey. And we're also looking to enable that for purchase by corporates as well. If you have any questions on that, please don't hesitate to contact BCS Publishing. We're trying to get Johnny back, clearly. Just waiting for him to sort of rejoin. Let me just drop him a note as well to say that we are waiting for him. I have got a question already, so thank you for that. I have a couple of questions as well that I'd love to ask Johnny as we get into it. So if there's any further questions, it'd be great if you could post them sooner than later so we can make sure we can deal with them in due course. Just waiting for Johnny. I think his connection's one that's gone rather than ours because we're still here. Try every different route that I can to get him back. But yes, anything that anybody wants to bring up now, we'd be very welcome to discuss it. If I could ask for a clarification as well, Stephen, what do you mean by PID is personally identifiable data? That would be useful to clarify that for your question when Johnny comes back in. Right. So yes, all good fun and games when you have a live author webinar. Unfortunately, nothing bad like this happened when we were practicing earlier. So this unfortunately has taken us the wind out of our sails somewhat. But I do believe that Johnny was near the end of the webinar, so that we were nearly done. I think he's covering a lot of issues, but he's also trying to bring up the high level of it and make sure it's clear the practical dimensions of migration to the cloud, particularly when you're starting to deal with lots of different parts of data and different software systems. And obviously there's a huge amount you can potentially deal with from legacy systems as well, particularly as new platforms come online which offer seamless access for lots of data. Okay, give him another couple of minutes and then might need to call it at that point. We'd be very happy to arrange something additionally as a makeup for this. Oh, project initialization document. Thank you very much, Stephen. Okay, I think Johnny has suffered some kind of outage at his end. I haven't heard back from him either by email or by text at the moment. Let me double check. No, the text unfortunately is not responsive at the moment. Okay. I think therefore that we need to call a close today's proceedings. I was going to ask some questions alongside of your questions, Stephen, on things like moving legacy systems when you have all these fancy new transformational projects being run on new platforms, and also thinking of an aspect of sustainability in terms of the cost benefit analysis and resilience. How much do you need to think about sustainability with respect to running on public cloud, particularly where that data is located, and any kind of carbon costs involved in that as more reporting comes in on that front. We haven't got Johnny back, so unfortunately we're going to call it close there, but thank you very much everybody for joining us. There are other events running, so please do check out the link that I posted. We have more on data coming up, including data strategy by Ian Wallace later this year. And we have others on business analysis, software testing, agile, all will be coming your way. And architecture is a new area that we've just started to publish in, and we're trying to build into that direction. I think Johnny's presentation so far has covered quite a few aspects of architecting cloud services as you migrate your systems and your software. So I think that's a good connection point, and making sure you can get that data onto the cloud in the right architecture is pretty important. So thank you all everybody for joining today. I will call a close now, and I will post again to everybody if we do have a makeup session for this. Johnny does do other events, and what we may do is work with another group to try and potentially book something in which would offer a greater opportunity for attendance, like a BCS specialist group or similar, and they may be able to offer everybody another opportunity to see Johnny live. Okay, smashing. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a good afternoon, and I shall see you all soon. Thanks. Bye. Oh, Steve, when you're ready, yes, please. Steve, you can talk now if you'd like to. Thanks, Steve. Okay, smashing. Have a good one, everybody. I shall see you all later.